hit record and we will get going. Any questions before we start? No? Okay, awesome. So, business model canvas. I'm going to skim through some of this because this is another presentation. So some of this we will go through. Other times I'm going to jump slides. I think all of us have a pretty good understanding of what a business model is, but I always like to grab some information from the audience and see, you know, when you actually hear that term, what do you guys actually think of? What's first thing that comes to mind? Somebody unmute themselves and tell me what you think a business model is.
It's a laid-back business plan.
Okay. That's what a business model canvas is. What about a business model?
Who are you selling to?
That is definitely a component of it. Anybody else? Come on, somebody's got to have an idea. What do you think a business model is? If I was...
Is it just like how you're running your business? Like things you've set in place for like how you're running your business?
So like a framework of how your business works?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a pretty good description. Yes. Often equate trying to explain a business model to kind of trying to explain a piece of art. Usually, you know, you kind of know what I'm talking about, but not everybody can kind of recognize what it truly is. And this is because for all of us, we have lots of different businesses here today. And there's lots of different industries, lots of different revenue models, lots of different marketing models, lots of different sales models. And oftentimes when we say business model, all those things kind of become interchangeable. So one thing that you'll see, like I'll pick on Fast Track right now, like a lot of, when we talk about models in tech businesses, oftentimes they'll talk about more around the customer acquisition model. Are you a free versus paid platform? Are you distributed versus centralized? There's a lot of different ways to kind of talk about it, but what we're trying to get you to focus on in Leap Junction's version of business models is kind of this diagram you see on the left. It's all about core competencies of your business. It's core frameworks. So we're going to talk about things like your target customer, your partner network, your infrastructure, your value configurant, your costs, your distribution, your marketing, your products and services. That's kind of the main stuff that we're going to discuss around business modeling. And that's how the canvas itself is actually mapped out. If you wanted an actual definition, the whole purpose of doing business model canvas is actually just to give you a vehicle to describe how you as a company create, deliver, and capture some type of value. So really the whole purpose of going through this is actually to build a better value proposition. And that's really what this whole week has been about. It's been a lot around value and really figuring out your why and the value for you and for your specific customers. On top of that, the canvas is a great way to see your design for a successful operation because it touches on a lot of key elements. And it really helps you to identify your specific revenue sources, customer base, products, and then details of financing. If you that would be more if you haven't already started, but all you guys have. So the key thing to remember here is sometimes people will use a business model canvas or lean canvas to replace a business plan. This is just kind of an additional tool. They're not the same thing, but one does influence the other, okay? I'm gonna skip this one, that's not as important. So the canvas looks like this, and usually we'll be doing this workshop in person and we have papers and we'd all be writing this out. However, we can't do that today, and I did have a software that we were gonna use today so you could just create your own quick digital version of it, but the website actually went down last night. So piece of paper that you're gonna have today, I'll give you a couple seconds when we do this afterwards, and you can actually just draw this out on a piece of paper, okay? You can actually just do it linearly too, but I like to see the canvas actually drawn out. So the canvas is actually pre-formatted into 9 blocks, and they call it a canvas because it allows you to paint the pictures of your new or existing business models. And we usually use sticky notes. Today, we're just gonna kind of jot things in. And these 9 blocks represent the essential core pieces of any business model, regardless of industry. In the center, at the heart of the whole thing, is the value proposition. From on the right-hand side, so everything from the center to the right, everything to the right of value proposition is all about your customer acquisition side. It's your customer side, it's your front-facing side. That's where you have your customer segments, all of your channels and touch points with your customers, and then the relationships you build with them. On the left side, it's all about kind of the back end, the behind the scenes stuff. This is all about, you know, the frameworks for making the business model run and work, and everything on the left side really supports everything on the right side. And then in the center is your value prop, which it's easy to get confused, but the value prop, you know, is, you know, when we talk about, it's a phrase, it's our elevator pitch, it's these things, but in the context of the canvas, it is both this big value, the value behind what we offer, but it is also essentially what you offer. So it is the bundles of products and services, and then the values behind that, okay? And the idea is that when you get kind of all the 9 blocks working together, you'll have answered the fundamental questions that any business model must solve to have success. So this really helps to expose weaknesses that might exist in your model. And I think that the Business Model Canvas really works well and works best when it's printed out on a large surface. And the idea is to get groups of people working on models together. Business Model Canvas is usually never done alone, okay? And we usually do a lot of sketching and discussion. So it's supposed to be hands-on in order to foster an understanding, a discussion, and creativity and an analysis of what you've built. So quick video, it's going to show, just kind of go over each of the 9 blocks, give us a little bit more detail, okay?
An organization's business model can be described with 9 basic building blocks: your customer segments, your value proposition for each segment, the channels to reach customers, customer relationships you establish, the revenue streams you generate, the key resources and key activities you require to create value, the key partners, and the cost structure of the business model. But it's not sufficient to just enumerate the 9 building blocks. What you really want to do is to map them out on a pre-structured canvas. This is what we call the Business Model Canvas, a tool that helps you map, discuss, design, and invent new business models. Let's briefly go through the 9 building blocks, starting with the customer segments. These are all the people or organizations for which you're creating value. This includes simple users and paying customers. For each segment, you have a specific value proposition. These are the bundles of products and services that create value for your customers. The channels describe through which touchpoints you're interacting with customers and delivering value. The customer relationships outline the type of relationship you're establishing with your customers. The revenue streams make clear how and through which pricing mechanisms your business model is capturing value. Then you need to describe the infrastructure to create, deliver, and capture value. The key resources show which assets are indispensable in your business model. The key activities show which things you really need to be able to perform well. The key partners show who can help you leverage your business model, since you won't own all key resources yourself, nor will you perform all key activities. Then once you understand your business model's infrastructure, you'll also have an idea of its cost structure. So with the Business Model Canvas, you can map out your entire business model in one image. This works for startup entrepreneurs just as well as for the most senior executives.
Cool. Make sense for everybody? Cool. Awesome. So there are a few rules.
Super useful.
Good. I like that video. It's super concise. So we have a few rules that are good for when you're kind of on your own time going through this that I'm going to just go through. It just helps organize your canvas a little easier if you're doing this. First one is we try to use sticky notes. Obviously, we're not doing that today. But if you want to make a permanent version of this, and I definitely recommend in these early stages of your startup that you do, I have this PDF. You can print it out, make a big one, laminate it, keep it around. And when you're using it, either laminate it, use whiteboard markers, or try to use sticky notes. Reason is that we need to move these sticky notes around a lot. And the reason is that in the first year of your business, things are in flux, and the canvas is more of a living model of your business rather than like a snapshot in time, like a business plan, where it's static and it's made for a certain point in time. Canvas is living and it should change with you. becomes like a living visual reminder of what's going on in your business, mapped out really quickly and in a fun way. So if we start to write on it permanently, things become permanent, but you're in a state of flux. So if you use sticky notes or whiteboard markers, it's an easy way to kind of change the conversation over time around your business. Oh, this is for people who haven't started their business yet. All of you have started, so I don't have to worry about that. It's just, this is if you talk too much about a business and never get going. If you're stuck in certain areas, you're trying to map something out. So let's say you were coming up with a new value, so a new product or service, but you haven't figured out other elements of it. When you're mapping it out through the canvas, if you can't figure it out, just start with what you do currently know about that value or that customer. Try not, this one, no bullets and avoid too much detail. Obviously we only have so much space on this. If you blow it up, yeah, you'd have a ton of space. That doesn't mean I want to see a novel of stuff written. We keep things concise here. When you're trying to describe something, I want you to keep it 3 to 5 words max. Try to polarize things a little bit. Only be as granular as you need to be. Because too many details kind of hide the big picture. Obviously, if you're still trying to work on something, like let's say it's a new offering or a new customer you're working on, but you haven't worked out the details, you can keep another notebook for that on the side. That's not for the canvas. This is just kind of, it's mapped out. I can look at it and I can instantly see you can even use pictures. I can see from a picture or a couple words, I know what the hell you're talking about. Okay, so I say usually try to use a big marker or just write really big. Okay. But if we're being, when I say only use a few words, that doesn't mean be vague. So you need to make sure that it's the right words you choose. So let's say we're talking about the revenue streams, which is the bottom right corner. You could say advertising is your revenue stream. Well, that's pretty vague. Obviously, advertising as a revenue stream, there's a lot of different things that could mean. So maybe it's that I make money through keyword auctions from Google AdWords. Well, that's very specific. So that makes a lot more sense, right? Best practice.
Hey, David.
Yeah, go for it, Omar.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say my laptop's about to die, so I'm just going to hop on my iPad and rejoin the call. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's totally fine, man.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
It'll ding, so I'll know when you're coming back in, and I'll let you in.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
When you're doing this, obviously, we're not going to do this in our workshop today unless you've got a bunch of colored pencils or markers, but you can do this as well. Or if you have colored sticky notes, it's helpful. We do use a color coding system. You saw in a picture of the canvas earlier, it was like, there was a lot going on in there, lots of colors. Color coding is great because most of you don't just have one customer segment, and most of you don't just sell one thing only. So we usually use a color coding system to make the canvas easier to navigate. And we color code based on typically by customer segment. So if I've got 3 customers, so maybe for Jesse, you've got restaurants, you've got grocery stores, and then maybe you've got consignment. Those are your 3 kind of maybe categories. You probably would describe your target customers differently, but we would use red, green, blue. Then you would say, okay, how do I make money from those people? So for your revenue streams, how you make money from the restaurants might be a little bit different. So I would have the revenue stream for that group would be red. So it just makes it easier. So each one of your customer segments is going to be represented most likely in all of the different 9 blocks of the canvas. And it's a lot easier when you're trying to show it to somebody. If they're looking at it with you and you're guiding them through, they can just follow along with the colors. You also may want to have a universal color as well. So if there's a way, maybe key partners, maybe all of your relationships, all your customer relationships rely on the same key partners. Well, then you're gonna have one color that represents them all, okay? You can also use this if you want to think about the future. Think about the business in 5 years or 3 years, but you never want to confuse it. So as you're building this, we're talking about today, your business as is, not what it's to be in the future. So make sure that you are using a separate canvas if you want to map this out of that future business model you hope to have. So if you want to completely shift to wholesale versus retail, those are 2 very different models. So you may want to have a separate canvas for that. And then if you're doing this and you start to notice that there are things that you're not totally sure about, like you may be mapping out your customers and you realize, I've never actually done proper customer segmentation. Do I really know that this person is my customer or this group is my customers? If there's something that's not a total fact, like you've done research, you've backed it up, you know for sure, just make a note of that, because that lets other people know that, oh, he needs more research there. Maybe I can offer some insights. It also lets you know that there's work to be done and it's not complete, okay? Next ones is just try not to leave any blanks. Don't leave any holes. All this is kind of like a series of dominoes that lean on each other. So each value proposition should be represented throughout the whole canvas. Same with each customer segment. So if you notice that there's a gap in there, that's a problem, okay? And that one we can skip. Okay, so quickly, right now on a big piece of paper, I want you to draw this out. So I'll give you like 2 minutes. It does not have to be pretty. But make sure you give yourself enough space on there to be able to take notes into those boxes. So sometimes what we do when we have to sketch this, I say take the value proposition to customer segments. You can draw that out on one piece of paper, and then with revenue streams under it. And then so it's like a right side versus left side on 2 pieces of paper. So I'll give everybody a minute.
I suck at art.
Oh man, I've tried to draw this out myself. I'm terrible at it. I had to do this on a big whiteboard one time, and Andre yelled at me for being so terrible. He is an artist, so I ended up having to use tape to map it out and keep straight lines. It was bad.
Yeah, especially like on a whiteboard, it's like insanely possible to make a straight line with a
Oh,
marker.
it sucks.
Like you'd have to be an actual psychopath if you could do that perfectly.
Oh yeah, Andre can. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, then there we go.
I said the exact same thing though. I said nobody can draw this freehand, and then he did.
Nobody.
Oh, okay.
Andre,
He's
please
a
don't kick me out.
psychopath.
Okay, let's see. It's a little blurry. Nice, good work. I don't know if that's going to be big enough to take notes, but it's okay as long as you can read what you're writing. That's fine. And you can always make a list on the back of the page too. Does anyone need any more time? Just shout.
Just like 30 more seconds, if that's okay.
Yep, no problem. Oops. Okay, was that enough time, Kelly?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, awesome. All right, I'm gonna skip this. We'll talk about that later. And then we'll go over this at the end, your value proposition template as well. Okay, so we're gonna use an example company. Nespresso is the one we're using. Anybody here not know who Nespresso is? Give me a show of hands. Everyone, I know Tyler can't, but I'm gonna do a quick rundown, give you just a quick sense of the company because it'll make sense for the examples, but I'm not gonna go into full detail here. So for those who don't know, Nespresso is the original pod company. They invented coffee pods. They are part of Nestle, so large international multi-billion-dollar corporation. I use them as an example because they're a great example of failure, believe it or not. So Nespresso, just a rundown of their business model. Nespresso has a really tight model when it comes to how they operate in relation to their competitors. Their main competitors are like Keurig, obviously, Tassimo, and any of the other coffee pod technologies. Secondary competitors obviously are, you know, the ground coffee you buy, any company that sells coffee beans, Starbucks and Tim Hortons and all the other coffee companies. So anybody in coffee is technically a competitor of theirs. However, they are the most successful coffee brand on the planet, hands down, largest market share. And it is all because of their unique business model and their commitment to being different and their commitment to personalization and customer service. They go above and beyond. So their business model is built around well-designed coffee machines and recyclable, that is key, recyclable aluminum pods that contain very high quality premium coffee. Now, they are interesting because they took, you know, that a very interesting business model around their revenue stream. So they're a good marriage of transactional revenue, which when we say transactional, it's a one-time transaction. So you buy a coffee machine, right? That's a one-time transaction. And then they merged that with recurring revenue. That was revolutionary before coffee pods existed. Nobody had done that before. So they took something, an entire industry that was all one-time transaction, and created this massive recurring revenue stream in it. So, you know, it's not a new way of thinking. There's been industries around that have existed like that a long time. Printers and ink, razors, gym memberships are all great examples of that, where you have a base product or service, which creates an opportunity for recurring revenue through a consumable product, which then creates a much larger revenue stream. So Nespresso defines themselves as a luxury coffee brand, boasting small machines with innovative design, great relationships, fair trade relationships with their farmers and coffee artisans. They employ many coffee sommeliers, which is unique to their brand as well. The machines have distribution only through their website, the Nespresso stores, which there are very few in Canada, and then through only select retail partners. In Canada, that is only typically the Bay and their affiliates, Canadian Tire, Amazon, and a couple others. The tightness of their business model comes in when you buy the coffee. If you buy a machine from Nespresso, you can't just go to the grocery store like you can with Keurig and buy coffee to replenish. You can't. They keep it real tight. You have to either go to an Nespresso store, or you can call them on the phone to order it, or you go to the website. And that's usually where most of the orders are done, through their website. They want tight control because they want customization so that you get the right coffee. Okay? So Nespresso is often considered the Apple of the coffee world, whereas Keurig would be the Microsoft of the Keurig world. So it's a great example of how many companies look to other examples of business models that they want to replicate. So if you look at Nespresso, you look at Apple, quality construction, super easy to use coffee machine. You just literally put the pod in, click it, hit the button. They invented that. They came up with the first machine. It couldn't be easier than that, right? Elegant look and feel. Their marketing campaigns are always really savvy and top-notch. They're somewhat pricey, much like Apple. And then again, tight control over distribution, just like Apple has tight control over software. And then the other piece, the direct copy from the model, is that they have their own boutiques, their own stores. Apple, you know, they stand alone in that. And well, not alone. Google has its own stores now too, but Apple's been doing it for a hell of a lot longer. So the big thing I want to recognize here is that failure in this model. When they launched in 1989, that was when coffee pods came out. How many people were using coffee pod machines in the 90s? How many of you were even born in the 90s? A few. Who here was born in the 2000s? Okay, good. A little older than that. Okay. Who here used a coffee pod machine before 2008? Nobody. Who here has never used one? Okay, 2 people. Okay. So yes, came out in 1989, spent 10 years of just dumping money and losing money. And that was because that they failed to recognize that they had targeted the wrong customers. They thought this was going to be something that salons would want, that restaurants would want, that hotels would want. They thought it was a total B2B product, and they were wrong. And they were wrong for a long time. And they sunk hundreds of millions of dollars into this project. And if it wasn't for Nestle's dollars backing the R&D, it would have just stopped there, it would have died. But they knew they had a unique product, and they knew if they just could figure it out that they would have success. And thank goodness they did, because it ended up working in the end. And now they're the most dominant brand in the market. So they realized after a long amount of trial and error that if maybe they pivoted the model and thought, okay, maybe this isn't something for offices. Maybe this is something to have on your counter at your home. If we can redesign it to make it look beautiful on your counter, maybe that's something that everybody would want. And that's what they did, and now they've had success. Usually I show everybody a commercial right now so you can get a sense of the brand and the feel. They've done a series of commercials over the last decade with Danny DeVito and George Clooney, which is always great. And I usually use this to kind of get us into our customer segmentation and think about who they're targeting, but we just don't have time for that today. So I'm going to skip that and think about, okay, you guys all understand what coffee companies are. We understand what Coffee Pod Machine is. We understand that Nespresso now is a luxury brand that has tight control over their distribution, and that they don't just compete with other pod machines, they compete with everybody in the space. So this brings us back to the canvas. So we're talking about the customers first. This is usually where we start. And if you've never actually written down a customer persona or details about your target customer, this is where you're going to do it for the first time. So what I want you to think through right now, we're going to take, actually, you know what? Maybe we're going to just do this at the end. So let's see how much time we have here. You know what? No, we'll do it right now. So I want you to look, so have a look on the screen. You're going to think about your customers. Write out what you can. Think about your demographics. Think about details around your customers. And we're going to do a little mini version of customer segmentation. I need you to write it out in a way that you're going to be able to afterwards explain it to the rest of the crew here about who your customers are. Okay? So before we do that, I just go a little details over customer segmentation, because a lot of you may have never done it before. Basically, customer segmentation is, taking your large group of customers, your customer base, dividing them up into groups and into individuals that are somehow similar in a specific way. If you're in B2B, then we're concerned about who are the decision maker job titles at the companies I'm working with. What's the industry or sector that I sell to? Is the company private or is it public? How big is this company? Where are they located? How do they buy? And what's that process actually look like? And what are their buying patterns? Those are just some examples. And then for B2C, it's more about looking at, okay, how old are the customers I sell to? What's their gender? What's their interests? What's their attitudes? What's their lifestyle? Where do they live? And if it's specific, if it's London, what's the neighborhood? Do you know? What's their socioeconomic status, their language, and do they have any spending habits? Those are the kind of things we try to get into. And we're going to go into customer segmentation in detail on Monday when we talk about market research and give you a bunch of resources around that. But just map it out really quick, talk about who you sell to. And these questions here are just to kind of prompt that if you're having a hard time thinking about who your customer actually is. But most of you should have an idea at this point. So take 2 to 3 minutes and just quickly jot it down. Kelly, go ahead.
And we're doing this right on our business model canvas paper, right?
Yeah, right on there.
Okay.
If you've got enough room, you can. If you want to just write it on the paper, that's fine too. Just make sure you put the heading customer segment, because we're going to go through this together afterwards. All right, does anybody need more time? Feel free to say something if you do. Looks like everybody's okay. They've mapped it out a bit. A lot of you should know who your customers are. Okay, awesome. All right, so in the case of Nespresso, who do they serve? Whose needs does their product meet? Well, that's mainly, okay, who is drinking coffee or espresso and might be looking for a new way to drink it? That's what we want to know, right? So in the case of Nespresso, they have two high-level customer segments. They have both B2C, which is their dominant area, and then they still dabble in B2B. For those who don't know, B2C is more about direct-to-consumer, business-to-consumer, and then B2B is a catch-all term for businesses that do business with other businesses. So in their B2B side of the business, they're still working with hotels, salons, offices, restaurants, companies and firms looking for high-quality coffee, that need a fast way to get their coffee either out to their patrons, to their customers, or to their employees, right? Second, and more dominant area is that household consumer. This consumer has more defined traits than their B2B side. They are typically 18 to 65 years old, so they know the age range. Coffee, huge age spectrum. Most food and beverage does have that. They know that these people have medium to high incomes. How do they know that? Well, because they went out and did research. It's important to note that too, because Nespresso machines aren't exactly cheap typically. They know that these people are definitely coffee drinkers, right? That's a habit that they have. They know they drink coffee, but they actually drink coffee a lot. And they probably, or most likely, will have a favorite roast. So they know a lot about coffee. And they have usually a favorite coffee spot, and it's typically more boutique-like. They also tend to be people who are quality and status-driven individuals. So they like or appreciate what is perceived as actually the best of the best. So these are very detailed and refined traits. It's important to note that. And if you were to watch any of Nespresso's guerrilla marketing campaigns, which they do a ton of, a lot of street marketing around the world, it's all about that. It's all about giving people the best of the best. It's pretty wild. They have some pretty cool campaigns out there. So next, after that, we're going to move on to value proposition in the center. So this is, obviously this is where you're going to list out what you actually sell. It's going to be a bunch of your products. It's going to be your services. It's anything, that actually creates that value for your customers. This is the, but it's going to be a little bit more than that. So you're going to list off the things you sell. And then you're going to list underneath that, what is the value you think that is, what the value is of that product for each of the segments that you sell to. So they're matched. Each customer segment is matched with a value proposition. And some value props and some products and services might go to all of them. So it might be a catch-all, or for some of you, it might be just individualized. So what I want you to do here is actually list the thing you're selling and list what you think the value is underneath it for that specific target customer, okay? The idea here is that, you need to be, how you want to focus on what's the value. Think about the problems the customer has. Think about the needs they have. What is it you're actually solving for them, okay? So this is where you describe benefits customers can expect and or needs that they have that your solution solves for them. So I'm just making sure all my notes here. That's good. So here's a quick list. Yours may be much different than this. These are just different ways that we're thinking of value creation around our products and services. Are we saving them money? Are we making them money? Is it something new? Is it about the aesthetics of it? Is it about health and wellness and beauty? Is it about the functionality and the usability versus the competitors or what's currently in the market? Are you, time saving is a big one these days. Are you helping with time? Omar and Aaron, that's definitely one of your values for sure. And you may have a bunch of these, you may have one of these, you may have none of these, but there's definitely some type of value that you can write down. You should be able to, okay? So take a few minutes now, and here's some prompting questions if you're having trouble figuring it out about what the value is behind what you're actually offering. So you're asking that question, what value do we deliver? Which one of the customer problems are we solving? Is there a certain job we're helping a customer get done? What needs are we satisfying? And then making sure you're listing the bundles of products and services that you're offering. Okay, so take 2 minutes, start to jot that down. And for you guys right now that may have a large suite of products, you can do it by product category, or you can just pick maybe one of your products or services. You don't have to list everything off today, okay? Maybe just your flagship product, what we call it, or flagship service, if you don't have the time right now. Hey, Tyler? Can you unmute your mic for a sec? Are you doing okay with this? Do you want me to send, are you able to see the screens right now? I wasn't sure if you were calling in or.
Yeah, so I'm calling in. I can't see anything, but I'm doing like research from my business that I just, like my classes. So I know exactly what you're talking about. You're just like refreshing most of everything.
Yeah. Okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
If you need any visuals, let me know, because I can shoot you an email, and obviously we'll make this all available afterwards too.
Yeah,
Is it,
no.
sorry.
Like the biggest thing I'm having is like the hardest difficulty for today was when you said the 9 blocks, but I was able to type that in on my phone and find that, like, to have those just so, like, so for next time you say the 9 blocks, just read the 9 blocks out for me, or for the, say for the next caller. That'd be the only thing. But that's been great. Thank you though.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry about that. Next time, I think I'll just send this to you ahead of time so you can look at it. If there's going to be days where you are calling in, Tyler, just email me the evening before, and I'll make sure to check in on the presentations, so that and make sure you can get the slides and stuff ahead of time. Okay.
Perfect. Much appreciated. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. So we got our values down, our value propositions. That's awesome. So we got our example here. What would Nespresso have written out? Well, so they listed out here. So they've got 3 main things that they sell. They sell the machines, obviously. So the machines, there's a lot of them. I'm not going to list all of them here, but they've got, I think, over like 8 different machines now. And they sell at different price points to different types of customers. I don't need to go into detail on that, but what are the values behind it? That's the important thing. That's the important stuff. Well, the machines are affordable. They're affordable for their contingent markets. And now actually, they do have a cheap machine that's directed at students. It's $90. So they're covering a large spectrum of, so, you know, they've expanded their product range to include that more cost-conscious consumer now. So they're affordable. They're small. So that means they're small in comparison to an espresso machine, which can take up a lot of space on your counter. They're really nice, new, well-designed piece of technology. So they're sleek, innovative looking, all-encompassing. You know, they're like a Mac versus a PC, you know. Capsules, values there. Oh, you don't like it, Jesse?
I'm a PC guy.
Oh, whatever. PCs are a lot nicer now. I know, it's a dated reference. Okay, capsules, super high quality. That's part of their value prop. Always the best quality. They'll always beat their competitors on quality and variety of choice. Over, I think, 170 different flavors of coffee. And then the last thing is a little bit intangible. It's the experience of the brand. Because Nespresso has made the experience a cornerstone of their company, they've gone so far as to put it as a thing they sell. Even though they give it away for free, the experience with Nespresso is so important, and it is through their entire company culture that it is almost like they consider it another product or service that they offer. And that's what's really made them unique in their market. They constantly give off this luxury image. They're a lifestyle brand, and it's all about the shop experience with them. If you're on the website, it's super customized, super personable. You don't even call it a website, it's called a club. You join a club when you become an Nespresso member. When you go to one of their boutiques, if it's not a kiosk, it's an actual boutique. The shop experience is wild. It's free food, free wine. They're really nice. When you compare it to a Tim Hortons, or you compare it to, you know, any of the other brands in their industry, they're definitely standing above. So that experience is super important for them, okay? So from these 2 things, we could now start to write out a bit of our value proposition. This is where we grab this template here, and we can start to do this on our own. You guys all have the value props you've been working on, and this is just one to get you started. It's very base level, and we're gonna go over how to really build these up in a different workshop. But this is essentially the basics of it. So if you know your target customer and you have an idea of the value you're offering and the needs and the problems you're focusing on, you could start to write out your value prop, right? So I'm gonna not go over this today because it's not important for our workshop, but we will go over this in more detail soon. But I will give you Nespresso's as an example. So if I was gonna write this out so I can start workshopping my elevator pitch, I would know who their target customer is, and you know, it's that status-driven individual with a medium to high income that wants high quality coffee with a perceived sense of style and status at home, and something that they can take to work. So they've developed Nespresso and Nespresso machines, which, what does Nespresso do? What's the benefit? Well, it gives you the best coffee at your own home rather than having to go out to get it, with that perceived style and in a way that's affordable, okay? So this is just a more detailed one. We'll go over that more. So next, we're gonna move on to channels. The channel box is all about customer experience and customer touch points. So what you wanna list off here is the spots that you think you're gonna have interactions with your customer and where you're gonna have opportunities to deliver value. Channels typically answer the questions, how are you connecting your value with the people who seek or need it? They're the vehicles that prove to your customers that you're gonna be the one to solve their problem. And channels usually serve a few functions. Channels help you raise awareness about your business. They give opportunity for customers to evaluate you, give opportunity for customers to purchase from you, give opportunities for you to actually physically deliver on that value, and they give customers the opportunity to have a bit of support if they need it after they've made a purchase from you. So what you're thinking about here when you're thinking about awareness, what you're going to write down here is, what are all the ways that you're raising awareness? So this is about marketing. What are the different types of marketing you're going to do for your business? Are you doing social media? Are you going to do Google AdWords? Are you making sure that you're being found on the search engine results page by doing SEO? Are you doing billboards and traditional advertising? Are you doing events and experiential marketing like Kristen's doing with her partnership in Fork River? So these are the different things to think about here. What's the different types of marketing and different ways you're raising awareness of the business? Okay, that's mainly what we want to list off here. The other stuff you want to list here is also those opportunities for evaluation. So awareness is about advertising and promotion. Evaluation is about where the heck do they go if they want to find out more about me. So are you going to have a website? All of you should be listing a website. All of you should be listing, I need to have a Google My Business page. That's kind of a day one stuff. Most of you are going to have social media. But is there other ways that they can find you and evaluate you? Is there more industry related sites and like catch-all databases? Like, is there a listing for accountants and tax services that you need to be part of that have nothing to do with your Google My Business page or website, but you need to make sure your business is listed there? So these are just where you want to list this stuff. So those are the two considerations when we're filling out these boxes. The other things that you want to think about here aren't quite as important for the exercise today, but they're important to note in this area because they do add to that customer touch point. One is, how are you allowing them to pay? Like thinking through the different payment methods that you allow. The other one is about delivery. So that's another customer touch point that should be listed here, because it's kind of that finish, the end of the road if you're a product, making sure that you have the right fulfillment happening with your business, because this adds to expenses and costs, but also adds to the customer experience, right? This is, right now we're all going through this. We're all waiting for packages to be delivered that just aren't being fulfilled, right? So it's another thing to think about. But mainly when you're filling out this box, I want to know about your channels of awareness and the channels for evaluation for today, okay? Post-purchase customer support's another add-on. These are things you got to think around as a business owner for when those things go wrong. Do you have a plan in place? What's your contingency if someone needs to get in touch with you and they've got an issue with what you sold them or what you've done for them? Lots of ways to manage this in these days. We got virtual assistants and chat bots and apps, and there's always lots of ways, but this part is so important. A lot of people don't think about contingency planning in their business and they just launch. You need to think about, okay, what happens if something goes wrong that I didn't even plan for? Who do they contact? How do they get in touch with me? What am I going to say to them? What am I going to do for them, right? So that's a lot of considerations, but we're not going to do that in the exercise today, but think about that in the future. Maybe make a note of, I need to actually think about my contingencies. Let's talk about everything that could possibly go wrong and what my customer service plan is for that. Okay, so take 2 minutes right now and think about, how do your customers find you and how do they evaluate you right now, okay? Hi, buddy. You being good? Okay, everybody got some stuff down? Awesome. So if I was Nespresso, what would I have listed here? We got our website, we've got our online channels, which are our social media. So for Nespresso, they're pretty heavy on Twitter, they're pretty heavy on Facebook, and they're pretty heavy on TikTok, actually. And then they definitely have a Google My Business page across the world. They have like an international page, and then they have regional pages as well, which you guys can have as well if you ever expand. They have their stores, their boutiques, so physical locations. They have 24/7 telephone support. That's another touch point. And then they have all their partner retailers that need PK knowledge, which is product knowledge about what they're selling. So they have a lot of touch points and a lot of channels that their customers can reach them through, which is super important here, okay? And this list will change and fluctuate and expand as time goes on for each of your businesses. We're going to skip that. Next is looking at customer relationships. So here it's about how you view, this is contextual, and this should be individualized to each of you. This is about thinking through, the types of relationships that you actually want to have with your customers, and also the types of relationships they expect to have with you as a business. And for everybody, that's different. Like guys that are looking for metalworking and machining are going to be have a whole different context of how you interact with them and the relationships you have with them versus someone who is looking for some vintage t-shirts, right? So here you want to describe like these types of relationships a company establishes with a specific segment. So for each of your segments, they may be the same, they may be different, and describe how you're actually maybe acquiring them and retaining them. That's a good way to kind of frame it. Think about the relationship around getting them as a customer and how you're going to keep them as a customer. What do you got to do? What does that relationship look like? And is the relationship with one segment different than another? Okay, and these can range from very personal. So you want to have one face-to-faces, or right now Zoom to Zoom, or are they automated and impersonal? Is it all the messaging? I go on Taxably's website. I don't have to actually talk to a person. I can fill out all that information automatically. But what if I was trying to build a different area of my business? Does that area of my business require a more personalized side of it? And what does that personalized side look like? Okay. So again, what types of relationships does each of our customer segments expect us to establish and maintain with them? How are we engaging with them? And how are they integrated into the rest of our business model? So 2 minutes, I want you guys to fill this out. I'll give you just an example. The relationships that that Nespresso leans on, it's very personalized. So all of their relationships are personalized. That means that they have 24/7 digital and phone support. When you're on their on the club, the website, it's always a human on the other side. It's never a bot. When you call them any time of day, if you have an issue, you always get a human. They answer on the first ring. That's very important to their policy. They never let the phone ring past one time. They have, the fact that they call it a club, it's all about inclusivity and being part of something. So for them, it's personalized and it's building a tribe and building a community. And then the other part of the brand is making sure that in all of that, it gives off kind of a luxurious feel, a glamorous feel. You feel like you're getting something that's a little bit better than you wouldn't experience with a different brand. Okay? Take 2 minutes, go. Okay. Anyone have trouble with that part? For anybody, was this your first time thinking about your actual relationship with your customers? Kelly, yeah? Nice. I find that usually that it's a little conceptualized. So it can be a little bit hard because unless you've had a lot of interactions with people and it kind of just, it can get a little bit more natural that way, it can be hard, you know. And the relationship you have, remember, the relationship you have now with them doesn't have to be the way it always is as you're figuring it out. You may have this version of it that you want to get to, and that's okay to think about too. I know with our Border Pass business, the relationship side of it was something that developed over time. As we changed and we pivoted like who we targeted, our relationship became much more family based. We started with a much different clientele, and we work mainly with just families and then recreation clubs and things like that. So how we navigated those relationships just kind of happened as we experienced it. So, and now we have a whole policy and we have a whole kind of methodology of how we think about it. So it is something that fluctuates over time. Okay, revenue streams. This part's pretty easy for you guys. This is basically just, I want you to think through what you get paid. So thinking about kind of go back to your value props for each of the value props you listed. What do you get paid for it? How much money are you making? And think about, is it transactional? So one-time payment, is it recurring? So just list off some kind of elements around the payment side of the business, around your revenue streams. So what are your main revenue streams? And make sure it's relating back to those customer segments and to the value propositions, okay? And here is also where—
I have a question.
Yes, Kelly, go for it.
So for revenue streams, is that like maybe talking about like whether you're getting money from one-time customers or repeat customers or one long-term client? Like, is that kind of what?
Yeah, you would list. So at the basic level, what we want you to do is actually list what you get paid. So whatever value prop you got there, so whatever product or service you listed, what do you actually charge for it? That's what I want to know. And then under it, you can put those other things too. So you can expand on that revenue stream and say, okay, this is more for my recurring customer. Typically, I sell these as a one-time payment. So you can elaborate on it as well. You don't have to list all that in your canvas, but I want you to have that knowledge. I want to know if it's transactional. I want to know if it's recurring. I want to know if you have aspirations for that stream to expand and change and grow over time. The idea here, typically we can use this in a couple different ways. This will expose, are you charging the right price? Is that, standard in your industry? And then it also gets you to see when you, on the left side of the canvas, when we have costs, you can actually start to stack them up against each other. If this is your first time mapping it out and thinking through your idea, you'd want to make sure that your revenue streams are higher than what your costs are to operate the business. But right now, it's about just kind of being able to make sure that you actually have a price associated, that it's the right price. We're going to share these with each other afterwards. And I want people to ask questions around this. Like, how did you come to this cost? How did you get this? How did that happen? I want you to question it for yourself and ask yourself, do you truly know what someone's willing to pay for what you're offering? Okay. So just take a couple of minutes. Also, another fun thing to do here is try messing around with the one of your offerings. Try to screw around with it. Offer a suggestion around, okay, could I offer this for free? Could I totally change this up and do a promo around that? This is where you get to have a little bit of fun. So how much do you get paid? And then kind of those ancillary details, okay? Okay, does anybody need more time? We're okay? Awesome. All right. Now we're gonna head over to oh, shoot, yeah. So just to give you some context, for Nespresso, I didn't list everything off here because that would just be silly for me. But the one thing I wanted to call attention to is just how profitable recurring revenue can really be if you can, find your way to kind of diverse your revenue portfolio. If you're Nespresso, only 4% of all their profit comes from the machines. 92% actually comes from the capsules. So if you can figure out a way to kind of do what's called a lock-in strategy, it can be very profitable for you. Now we're gonna head over to the left side, and we're gonna talk just quickly here, key partners box. This is where you list out kind of your network of suppliers, your network of partners. This is where you think about, is there someone who can help me leverage my business model? Is there someone that's going to help my business run, help my business work? So this is where it's just, you got to think about it. Okay, I need these people to do the things I need to do for my business. Without them, things do not work. This can be everything from a lawyer, an accountant, or to a possible investor. It could be to a supplier or another partner. Maxwell, it's obviously suppliers are key for your business, so that's where you would list it off there. So partnerships, when you're thinking about this, is thinking about think about ways to reduce cost, think about outsourcing, thinking about legal components and aspects of your business, outsourcing, sharing infrastructure, risk reduction, anywhere where there's uncertainty or anything around, getting a competitive advantage. That's where we think in partnerships. So quickly take a minute and jot down some of the key partnerships that you've established and some that you've yet to obtain, okay?
Awkward silence.
What's that, Omar?
I just said awkward silence.
Oh. Okay, was that enough time for everybody? We're good? Okay. So this is the question you're asking yourself. What else do you need to make your model work? Who can do the work that you can't or won't? Those are kind of key inspirations of thinking through who might need to be added into your model. For some of you guys, for small businesses, sole proprietors, this might be a really small list. But if you're an Nespresso, it's a massive list. Obviously, you don't become an international player in the coffee industry without relying on some key partners. For them, they have a ton of manufacturers they work with. They have their coffee bean suppliers. They have all their retail partners. They have marketing agencies and companies they work with for different aspects for their promotions. They have IT service that they outsource, web development and support. They have experts for, that are coffee sommeliers. So ton of partnerships that keep that business model afloat, okay? Next, we're gonna just look at key activities. Here under the key activities box, we're describing the most important things that you need to do to make your model work. What's the key elements, if you strip everything else away, that you gotta do? So Kelly, what's the key thing that you have to do? Well, you need to produce work, right? Like you have to be a ceramicist and make the work. So what are all the key activities that are required to create your offerings, to create your products or services? What are the key activities you have to do to reach your market? So to gain access to your customers. What are the key activities you have to do to maintain your customer relationships? And what are the main things you have to do to make that cash, okay? So just take 2 minutes here. And I'll give you a hint. Every single one of you should list marketing on here as a key activity. Marketing and advertising. Okay. Anybody need a bit more time? Okay, perfect. Okay. So many good videos I could have showed you. Oh, well. So if I am Nespresso, what am I listing here? Well, production obviously is a huge part of their business model. They have to produce the machines and the actual coffee. So that's, production with their farmers, production with manufacturing. They have to do marketing and branding. You don't stay number one without spending money on marketing and branding. Yeah, and so this is, marketing branding through traditional advertising, brand ambassadors like George Clooney and Danny DeVito, guerrilla marketing campaigns, tons of social media marketing. So a huge component of their business. B2C distribution is important for them. They have a direct distribution strategy, so shipping direct to consumer for all the coffee to get the coffee pods is super important to them. That especially when you're an international business. Sorry, guys. The dog out. So that becomes number 3 on their list of key activities. R&D is number 4. Research and development of new products. So how much time are you committing, to R&D, to making sure that you're innovative in your industry, that you're on that cusp of what's happening in your industry. So R&D for a lot of you is important. And then for them, the last most important key activity is curating an experience. What that means is ensuring that the experience for all customers, regardless of what their touch point is personalized and is true to their brand, so that it feels unique and it feels luxurious. So that is very important to Nespresso, important enough to make it into their key things that they have to focus on. So this is your guiding light, your North Star in your business around the actions that you got to be doing to make that model work, okay? Lastly is key resources. So this is basically where you would list, you would go back and look at those key activities, and you should be able to outline the resources or assets that you need to carry out each of those activities. And you're just going to describe the most important ones. You're not going to list off every single asset and resource you need. You need pens, you need a phone, you need whatever. I don't need that. I want important assets, important resources you need to make sure to capture, create, and deliver your products or services, okay? And these can be things that you own. They can be things that you got to buy. They can be things that you got to lease. They can be things that you got to acquire from a key partner. Okay, so take a minute and look at your key activities and start listing off your high-level resources. A good way to kind of think about this, I'll leave this list up here, is think about physical resources, think about any intellectual resources, so their knowledge that you need, is there financial resources that you need for a lot of this, and then human resources as well. Okay, anybody need more time? We're good there? Excellent. Okay, and then lastly, but most importantly, is thinking about the bottom left box, which is your costs to operate. Things to think about here are just, you're just gonna list off what are your big expenses to run your model. So these are, you know, if you haven't done so already and I know a couple of you aren't quite fully up and running. So what are some of your startup costs gonna be? What are the big things you have to spend money on to make this happen? And then thinking about like, what's your ongoing operating costs. So these are things that can be fixed. These are things that are variable. Key question to ask yourself here is there anything that can be minimized? So this is where you want to list off that stuff. Okay, what's going to cost me a bunch of money to run this business? Ideally, you know, we want to operate as lean as possible. So writing this out and then getting someone else to look at it, you know, might expose some places where you might be able to save some money. All right. So I can't stress this enough, and obviously this isn't the place for it, but you must know the overall costs to operate every aspect of your model. You know, but for the Canvas, we go much more high level, but this exposes a lot of components of your business. Customer segmentation and customer acquisition and your marketing and customer relationships, all of that have a lot of expenses involved in it, as well as producing your product and services. And if you don't know all the costs involved there, then you run the risk of being hit with some circumstances that'll just arise out of nowhere that you didn't expect that could have been avoided. And we will go over that in more detail in later weeks. So take another minute and a half and just start listing off some of the big costs that you have and bucket them by, if you haven't already started and spent the money, put it as a startup cost, then put it as kind of some of your fixed or variable costs that are ongoing to operate your model, okay? quick show of hands here. Who's actually spent the time and gone through their, you know, their business and actually listed off, like understands all the costs involved in every aspect of their business? Raise your hand if you've done that. Suraj, I would hope you've done that. Good, good. Who has yet to do it?
I don't have it written out per se, but I have a general knowledge of where my money goes and how it comes in.
Okay, do you know what each unit of hot sauce costs you, including your own time?
Oh yeah. I know my profit margin and all that kind of stuff.
Good. Maxwell?
A quick question. Like, my cost structure is a little different. Like,
Certainly is.
I can go to a thrift store and spend $10 or spend like $500. It just depends on the day. Should I just be putting down like reoccurring expenses?
Yeah, so like obviously for you, supplies, that's more like, you know, your supplies and your product. And then, you know, like for instance, when you left, like there's travel costs. So for you, you know, acquiring your product is a much different model than most traditional businesses. It's almost for a project by project basis. And then figuring out your unit costs and stuff. You have a much more complex model when you're doing vintage. So yeah, you're just gonna list out kind of the higher level components of it.
For sure.
Cool. Okay. So if we think about Nespresso, again, we're talking about production is their biggest thing. You know, they have the farmers, the manufacturing, the coffee specialists, all that coffee production. That's a huge expense for them. R&D is very costly. Distribution is the third most expensive cost for them for B2C distribution. And then fourth most expensive thing that they're looking at is marketing and branding. Of course, there's many other things that we could list here, but again, the Canvas is about discussion, which is going to lead us into our next part. I know we're at 2:01. Does anyone have any issues with staying for another 15 minutes? And then we'll finish. No, we're okay? Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys a quick video here. And this is Alex Osterwalder. He's just going to go and actually do a quick business model canvas. You'll see him go through it, and that'll kind of show you how you can kind of discuss. Because then as soon as we finish this video, I'm going to put you guys in breakout rooms, and I want you to just share components of your business models with each other. So you just, one person can start. We'll just go in 2 rooms of 5. And I'd love for you guys to kind of just explain your models to each other. I was hoping we'd have a bit more time for the discussion, and I'll bounce in and out of the room. So I'd love for you to just try to give insights, please, you know, especially around target customers. If you have an insight that you can offer somebody, even if, you know, it might not seem relevant to them now, but it may spark them for something in the future, okay? So just give me a second here. Everybody can see this? Cool.
So let's start by sketching out the business model of Google. And we're just going to look at the essence of their business model. So we're not going to go into the details. We're going to look at the blueprint of their strategy. So let's start with the value proposition. Google helps us find information, and no value proposition is independent of the customer segments. So who are they targeting with this? Users globally. Ask yourself, when did you do a Google search the last time? Probably the last 24 hours. So how does Google reach us? Through which channel? Through Google.com. And what kind of relationship does Google establish with us? Well, it's 100% automated. You can't just call Google and ask them something, right? It's automated. Now, what do we pay for what they offer us? Nothing. Google is free. This is a business model that's based on a free service. So what do they have to be able to do to offer all this? Let's look at the backstage of their business model. First thing here is that they have developers who do software development. They have developers who do network development, because behind Google is a very, very, very substantial IT infrastructure. And what do they also have, which is something we might forget, is intellectual property. Google started out with very specific algorithms that allowed them to offer this value proposition to better find information on the web. Now let's look at the partners they have, and I'll keep it very simple here. It's basically the telecom infrastructures that offer them the pipes to reach the internet. Now let's look at the main costs, and when we have this sketched out, we very quickly can sketch out the costs, mainly IT, and the bandwidth of their service on the internet. Now this is not yet a very good business model because everything's for free. So we need to look at the second part of their business model. They're targeting advertisers. And what do they offer advertisers? They offer them an audience to reach and sell advertising. So what we need to put here in the infrastructure, in the key resources, is a large base of users. Without a large base of users, they don't have a value proposition to advertisers. How do they reach the advertisers? Also through the internet, also through Google, but through Google AdWords, their program. And how do they earn money from this? Well, you could say it's advertising, but you want to be more specific. It's basically keyword auctions. It's auctioning off keywords that makes them a very, very wealthy company. Now, if we look at the relationships, it's also automated, which allows them to create a very scalable business model. And voila, you have the blueprint of Google's strategy.
Cool. I hope that explained a little bit more of how you can map it out. So we're going to go quickly into some breakout rooms here. And give me a second. I've already established some here. So I'll join in a second. I'll kind of just bounce between you guys. And anyone want to volunteer to go first to explain their model to the rest of the crew? Okay. So once you're in the room, you can start, Jesse, and then anybody else that wants to explain it, would love to hear from you and see if there's any insights that we can gather. Okay.